Welcome to Mr. Night Media.
A calm afternoon of rain. John Bradley sat at his desk, immersed in old books and documents. He was a researcher, constantly searching for mysteries hidden in history. That day, he was engrossed in a new project, studying the historical significance of old houses in America. Most of the documents in his possession were clippings from old newspapers and a few books on local history. But suddenly, John's eyes caught sight of an unopened envelope on his desk. His name was clearly written on the envelope, but there was no sender's name or address. Opening the envelope, he found a letter that pulled him deep into a mystery with each word. The letter read, "John Bradley, you are a brilliant researcher. We have heard your name for a long time. We have been troubled by the history of our ancestral manor for years. It is now completely abandoned, but we believe its history can still be preserved. If you are willing to help us, you may respond soon. Evergreen Manor." John read the letter several times. Evergreen Manor. He had never heard the name before, but his curiosity was piqued. Researching such manors and palaces was his passion. A mysterious invitation to a manor in California seemed like it was waiting just for him. Within moments, John made up his mind. He would go there. A few days later, John set off for Evergreen Manor in his car. He couldn't find any accurate maps or detailed history of the manor on Google, but he relied on the directions and hit the road. The path was lonely, shrouded in darkness, with towering trees on either side, giving him the feeling of entering a deep forest. On the way, John had the chance to talk to a few locals. When they heard about Evergreen Manor, their faces darkened unnaturally. An old woman told him, "Don't go there, child. That house is cursed. Those who go there never return." Another said, "The manor swallows people. If you go, you won't come back." John brushed it off with a light laugh. He had heard such old superstitions many times. Letting ghost stories deter him from a research opportunity wasn't his style. But the chill left by the old woman's words lingered in his mind. Upon reaching the manor, John stepped out of his car. The enormous structure loomed before him like a void of darkness. Massive, old, and somewhat supernatural. The surrounding trees stood still like the dead. In front of the entrance were crumbling stone statues and broken railings, telling the tale of the mansion's ancient past. John entered the house. The first thing he noticed was the strange coldness in the air. Though it was daytime, inside the manor felt like perpetual night. He walked around for a while. There was no sign of life, just the faint sound of wind coming through the cracks in the windows. Suddenly, he heard a sound from near the door. He slowly turned around but saw nothing. Then, once again, he heard a distant whisper, like someone speaking through the wind, though the words were incomprehensible. John, though unsettled, kept calm. He chalked it up to the wind or sounds from the dilapidated parts of the old mansion. But the creeping fear in his mind was becoming harder to shake off. For the first time, he realized that Evergreen Manor was not just an old mansion. It held something inside it that he could never have imagined. John's first night at Evergreen Manor was uneasy. Amid small, strange occurrences in the cold air, he tried to focus on his work. To him, this manor was a golden opportunity. The chance to uncover the history of such a mysterious house kept him hooked. The next morning, John decided to survey every room in the house and take notes on everything. While searching for the main floor plan, he found an ancient map, nearly a century old. From the map, he understood that the mansion's design was extremely complex. Many corridors, hidden rooms, and several circular towers. It was clear that the mansion had been built for a wealthy family, with different rooms reserved for guests and family members. At first, everything seemed normal. John continued moving from room to room, noting which parts had survived and which had crumbled. But soon, the abnormality began. A particular old wooden door caught John's attention. The door had an intricate old design, and the handle was made of heavy metal. He tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Thinking it might be locked, he moved on to another room. However, the next morning as he passed by the door again, it was suddenly open, as if it had never been closed. Surprised, he tried to open the door again, and this time it opened easily. Inside, he found a cold, dark room, scattered with small items, but oddly, nothing seemed touched by time. John couldn't understand how the door had been locked the previous day and was now open. He then entered another room where he had spent the previous evening. From the window, he could see the distant green hills. But now, instead of the window, there was a stone wall, as if the window had never existed. John began to panic, realizing that the house was playing tricks on him. Some rooms were not staying the same, doors and windows were shifting, and even the length of the corridors was sometimes changing. Some doors, when opened, led straight to other rooms, which should have been impossible. The following night, John encountered more bizarre occurrences. He noticed that parts of the house were disappearing. Where he had seen a large room the previous day, there was now just an empty corridor. He stood there for a long time, wondering how such a thing was possible. Was the ancient structure of the house creating illusions, or was there some horrific truth behind it? After a few days, John discovered some information about the house's owners. In an old local archive, he found that the last owner of the house was Duke Henry. Duke Henry had been an influential and wealthy man, but a dreadful mystery had surrounded his family. One night, Duke Henry, his wife Clarissa, and their young daughter Emily were in the manor. They had gathered for a simple dinner, but for some strange reason, all three of them disappeared together. There were no witnesses, no traces were found, and despite extensive investigations, the police never found their bodies. All that was known was that from that night, the atmosphere at Evergreen Manor changed drastically. Reading about Duke Henry's family, John fell deep into thought. He realized that the strange occurrences in the house might be linked to the mysterious disappearance of that family. The mansion was not just an abandoned house. Parts of that night's event still lingered there. The house was slowly revealing its secrets to John. Now the question remained, would John go deeper and uncover the real mystery of the house, or would the house consume him? One evening, John found himself standing in the mansion's main library. The large room was bathed in the soft light of candles, with towering wooden bookshelves all around, filled with the scent of old books. The dust floating in the library's air and the heavy silence seemed to pull him deeper into the mystery. After flipping through several old books and documents, he suddenly noticed an old, dust-covered diary. The pages seemed to call out to him, as if holding centuries-old secrets. The diary belonged to Duke Henry's wife, Clarissa Henry, her elegant handwriting still intact. The first few pages described the family's ordinary life, the luxurious lifestyle in the manor, parties, guests coming and going. But after a few pages, Clarissa's writing began to change strangely. Her tone grew increasingly restless and fearful. Clarissa wrote, "The first few years in Evergreen Manor were normal. But then, one day, I noticed something strange. At night, when everyone was asleep, I felt as though someone was wandering inside the house. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but as the days went by, the presence became stronger." As John flipped through the pages of the diary, a strange chill started creeping over him. According to Clarissa's account, there was an unseen force in the mansion, something that began to slowly take hold over the family. At first, it was minor incidents, shadowy figures, mysterious sounds, and strange pressure on doors, but gradually the darkness began to influence them, especially Clarissa. "I now believe that we are not alone in this house. There is something here, something that is slowly consuming all of us. Duke Henry refuses to talk about it. He believes it's all a figment of my imagination, but I know my feelings are not wrong." As John read each line, he found himself sinking deeper into the dark history of the mansion. Clarissa wrote about how, night after night, the strange occurrences grew more terrifying. First, the servants began to disappear. Then the guests started falling ill with strange symptoms. Finally, even the family members began to succumb to the dark force. "I feel as if the house is using us in its own way. Since we've arrived, I haven't been able to sleep. The shadows follow me. They whisper in my ear, as if calling me somewhere. Sometimes I fear that this house is trapping us in its cage." Clarissa's writings grew more and more disjointed as time went on, her mental state clearly unraveling. In the later pages, her words became almost incoherent. She recounted a night when her daughter Emily had awoken to a terrible scream. The girl claimed to have seen someone standing outside her window, but Clarissa knew that there was no place for anyone to stand outside that window. We wanted to escape, but the house won't let us. I don't know how much longer we can survive. The influence of the house is affecting Henry as well. He's not the same person anymore. This mansion is driving us all mad. The final pages of the diary lacked any specific dates or clear sequence of events. There was only one cryptic message. This house is not just a structure. It is a soul. It is consuming us. I now understand that once someone enters, there is no way out. John closed the diary and took a deep breath. The mysterious disappearance of Duke Henry, his wife Clarissa, and their daughter Emily was no ordinary incident. The mansion was not just made of old stones and wood. It hid within itself a terrifying entity, a cursed spirit that slowly enslaved everyone who entered. Now John understood that Evergreen Manor was not merely a house. It was a trap, one that devoured anyone who crossed its threshold. Once inside, there was no escaping its clutches. The mansion had called him, but could he survive it? Or would he too fall prey to the cursed house, just like Duke Henry and his family? Time seemed to stand still for John within the mansion. Each day and night passed in the same suffocating atmosphere, each moment bringing the sense that the house was slowly swallowing him whole. Every word of Clarissa's diary now echoed in his mind. This was not just a house, it was a soul, a trap. At first, he believed there might be a way out. Perhaps the haunted atmosphere was just a trick of his imagination. But gradually he came to realize that the mansion was weaving invisible chains around him. Each day, as he searched for a way to escape, the corridors seemed to change in strange ways. One day, a door might offer a glimpse of hope, but the next day that same door had transformed into a solid brick wall. Even the windows no longer showed any path to the outside world. John realized that the house was trapping him here. One cold evening, as the air grew heavy with whispers, John witnessed a bewildering scene. He entered the old dining hall of the mansion, where a large table was set just as Clarissa had described in her diary. But John knew there was no one here. The plates on the table were abandoned. The food had long dried out, yet there was an eerie presence in the air. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The figures of people began to materialize around the table, as if he was watching a memory from the past. Duke Henry, his wife Clarissa, and their daughter Emily sat at the table, talking and laughing, but beneath their laughter was a deep, unsettling sadness. John slowly realized that he was witnessing a fragment of time. He was about to see the tragic events that had led to the family's mysterious disappearance. The shadows froze, the room turned icy cold, and outside the window lightning flashed. John saw Duke Henry rise from his chair, his face etched with terror as if sensing something that the others could not. Clarissa looked at him with fearful eyes, and little Emily clung to her mother, trembling. Then John heard it, a terrifying roar that shook the walls of the mansion. Henry screamed, "They're coming! The house is taking over!" John watched in horror as the shadows began to dissolve. Pain twisted across the faces of Clarissa and Emily. Henry grabbed their hands, trying desperately to escape, but every door in the house slammed shut in front of them. The darkness engulfed them, and in an instant they vanished, forever. John had witnessed it all, as if he were a silent spectator of that fateful night. But it wasn't over. Now he understood that the mansion wasn't just a witness to their suffering. It was forcing that suffering to repeat itself over and over again. From then on, the shadows began to haunt John as well. Duke Henry, Clarissa, and Emily, each of them reappeared in John's presence, their torment reaching out to him, begging him to set them free. But how? The mansion was now filling John's mind with fear and sorrow. The pain of its past inhabitants was seeping into his very being. He realized that the house had not only trapped him, but was turning him into a prisoner, just like them. The suffering, the curse, the house's dark presence, all of it was now clear to John. He screamed, "Let me go! I don't want to be like you!" But the whispers, the shadows, and the chilling atmosphere only pulled him deeper into the abyss. Every moment at Evergreen Manor had now turned into a living nightmare for John. The slight uneasiness from the initial strange incidents had escalated into sheer terror. Every wall, every corridor, and every shadow seemed to carry the presence of an ominous force. John could feel that he was no longer alone. Something was always watching him, observing his every move. The shadows of Duke Henry, his wife Clarissa, and their daughter Emily kept replaying the events before John's eyes, increasing the pressure on his mind. He was beginning to understand that these souls were trapped in a cursed loop, and their shadows were unwilling to let him go. One night, while John was trying to read a part of the diary in the library, he started to see strange things. The shadows around him became denser, and the room was filled with an unearthly coldness. Once again, he heard that faint whisper. This time, the sound was clearer, as if someone was standing right beside him, speaking into his ear. Frozen in fear, John looked around, but there was no one. Suddenly, a dark figure materialized before him. It was Duke Henry, but his appearance was no longer the noble, kind-hearted man John had read about. His face was filled with unease, as if his soul had been trapped inside the manor for centuries. In a soft, unsettling voice, Henry's shadow said, "You can't escape from here, John. We couldn't either." John took a few steps back, his heartbeat quickening. "Why are you all trapped here?" John asked, his voice a mix of fear and curiosity. A deep sadness flashed across Henry's eyes. "This manor isn't just made of stone and wood. It's something far greater, something beyond life itself. It feeds on our pain, sorrow, and fear, turning it into its strength. When I first moved here, I had no idea the house harbored an unseen presence, slowly consuming us. We didn't realize we were becoming part of a cursed tale ourselves." John listened intently, unable to move. Henry continued, "My wife Clarissa, my daughter Emily, we are all victims of this manor. Once you enter, you don't leave alive. We're trapped here, and the strange entity within the house won't set us free. Our suffering only made it stronger." Suddenly, John noticed more shadows gathering around him. They weren't just Henry, Clarissa, or Emily, but all those who had lived in the manor before them. Each of their faces bore a dullness, their expressions filled with pain. They all surrounded him, one by one, whispering, "Free us, John. End our suffering." John's breath grew heavy. How could he possibly free these souls? He himself was struggling to survive against the dark forces of the manor. But John felt like he was now standing before the manor's deepest truth. This house wasn't just a structure, it was a soul, a malevolent entity of tremendous power. Those who entered once were forever enslaved by it. John now knew the truth, but there was no easy way out. "What can I do?" John asked, trembling. Clarissa's shadow spoke softly. "If you can find the heart of the manor, you might be able to break the curse. But you'll have to conquer your own fear. The dark entity of the house won't let you go easily." The spirits of the manor's residents were growing denser around him, their haunting faces and whispers pressuring him. John knew this journey would not be easy, but he also realized that if he could somehow find the heart of the manor, he might become the only person to escape alive, and the curse of the manor would end forever. But to do that, he'd have to fight the entity that controlled everything within the house. The walls of the manor's corridors seemed to come alive as John ventured deeper. The shadows around him were darker and more menacing than ever before. He knew that tonight would be the most crucial of his life. If he failed now, he would be trapped in this cursed darkness for eternity. Following the directions from the ancient scroll, John finally reached the dark heart of the manor, the source of all its terrifying power. According to the scroll, there was a particular room he had to enter, where the core of the manor's strength lay. However, crossing the threshold would not be easy. He knew the manor would use all its power to stop him. Standing before the door to the room, John took a deep breath. His hands were trembling, but he knew there was no turning back. As soon as he opened the door, a chilling wind struck him with force, as if the entire manor was trying to prevent him from entering. Once inside, John saw that the room was completely shrouded in darkness, with only a stone altar at the center. Upon that altar lay the source of the manor's curse, a dark, glowing orb that filled the air with a heavy, sinister energy. The scroll had said that this orb was the core of the manor's power, and destroying it would set him free. John began to recite the ancient incantation written in the scroll. As soon as he did, the shadows in the room started attacking him. From every corner, the dark figures emerged, trying to stop him. His ears filled with growls, whispers, and agonizing screams. With every moment, he felt as though his fears were consuming him more and more. The souls of the manor's residents fought against him at every step. The shadows reached for him, as if trying to drag him into the darkness. Strange growls echoed around him, as if the whole manor had risen against him. At one point, he felt his breath being stifled, and his body too seemed to be resisting. But John didn't stop. He kept chanting the incantation, moving closer to the orb. The orb's eerie light radiated outward, scorching John's skin. He felt as though his flesh was burning, but he knew this was his only chance. Then, the dark power of the manor revealed its true form. The orb's light intensified, and a figure materialized before him. This was no ordinary shadow, but the embodiment of the manor's dark soul. The figure advanced toward John, trying to halt him, while the trapped souls tried to sow more fear in his heart. "You will fail!" the dark force roared, as if the entire world began to shake. But John knew that if he backed down now, there would be no escape. He recited the incantation one last time and reached for the orb with all his might. The orb began to tremble at his touch, and then there was a massive explosion on the floor. A strange scream echoed from every wall of the manor, as if hundreds of souls were crying for release. A fierce wind hit John, and for a moment he closed his eyes. Then everything stopped. After a few moments, John opened his eyes. The room was now calm, and the dark orb had melted away. The ominous force surrounding the manor was gradually disappearing. The darkness had been defeated for good. John collapsed to the ground, exhausted. His body was weary, but a strange peace filled his heart. The curse of the manor had been broken, the shadows were gone, and the souls were finally free. However, John knew that this journey had changed him not just physically, but mentally as well. He was no longer the same person. What the manor had shown him, what he had experienced, could never be forgotten. Slowly, John stood up and made his way toward the door to leave the manor. John walked toward the door to exit the manor. He felt an odd emptiness inside, but a new light of peace shone in his heart. The curse had been broken forever, though he knew this experience would stay with him for the rest of his life. As the door opened, John stepped outside. The soft orange glow of the sky spread across the horizon just before sunset. The manor no longer looked terrifying. The air around it now carried a sense of peace, and the surrounding trees seemed to signal a rebirth. John began to think about what to do next. The darkness of the night and the supernatural experiences had exhausted him. The manor's dark shadows still lingered in his mind, but he knew he was moving toward a new dawn. He decided to inform the local authorities about the manor's true secret. The manor would be abandoned, and a monument would be erected as a warning for future generations. Leaving the manor behind, John started to return to his own life. He was ready to embrace the lights of the city, the laughter of people, and the simple joys of life. Inside him, there was a new strength, a new journey. First, he informed the local authorities about the history and curse of the manor. The police, journalists, and historians began investigating the manor. Based on John's account and the evidence, the manor was officially declared abandoned, and a memorial was erected at the front as a warning. A new chapter began in John's life. He moved forward with a new dream, to seek peace and share his experience with others. He decided to write a book, detailing the manor's history, his strange experience, and the journey to freedom. This book would serve as a warning to people that fighting against dark forces requires courage and resilience. The manor was no longer a source of terror. It stood as a memory, a part of history, and a lesson. John knew it was time to move toward the bright future of a new day, and the supernatural experience had made every moment of life even more precious. John had rediscovered himself, and his life moved forward with renewed hope and strength. After leaving the manor, his mind and soul felt free, as he moved toward the light of a new life, toward a future brighter than the shadows of his memories.